Thank you all for joining us to discuss the riddle of Greek life, and it really is a riddle, what's going on at fraternities these days. In the last year, 4 deaths, I believe, hazing deaths at fraternities, many alcohol-fueled sexual assaults. John Heckinger, you've talked about what you call the unholy trinity of alcohol, misogyny, and racism at fraternities. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure. I mean, the research is very clear that fraternity men drink more than anyone else on your campuses. The longitudinal Harvard research showed that it was 90% binge drink, which is twice the level of others. That fraternity parties are not safe places right now for women, that women run 1.5 times the risk of sexual assault, and that fraternities are among the most segregated places on campus. Something like only 4% of members of historically white fraternities are African Americans. And even more, it divides campuses on the lines of gender and race. So these are the problems that many colleges are struggling with, and in many ways, they're kind of at the center of it.
So Eric, on your campus, Theta Pi was the model, or considered one of the model fraternities. And I believe they had video surveillance in their chapter house. They had a resident advisor living with them. They had also taken a pledge not to drink. So what went wrong? Why was Timothy Piazza killed at Beta Theta Pi?
Well, I would have to say that it's because a group of young men appear not to have been thinking about him as their brother, but instead protecting a house. And so what you saw was a beautiful house with no red drinking cups and no block parties, but behind closed doors, it was something very different. And it had a very sad outcome.
Did they lie to you and lie to the university about what was going on there?
So I don't know whether you could describe it that way. If I talked to the police officers, they would tell you there were no complaints. There were no issues, no arrests. If you talk to the people that were around the house, they would tell you that this was a beautiful house and there were no signs of poor behavior. But inside there must have been a culture of hazing that involved alcohol, and it ended up with a tragedy. So I don't know whether you can call that as a lie as much as it was hidden.
It was very deceptive.
Yes, very deceptive.
So back in 2015, you had started a task force to look at fraternity and sorority life at Penn State. What kind of pushback did you get when you tried to do that?
Well, we had decided that we were going to be comprehensive, and we were going to bring every stakeholder into the room. And it was a relatively large group. And what we discovered was there were some things we could agree on, but many of the fundamental things, community members wanted it to be harsher. Fraternity and sorority members thought that it was too harsh. And so they had a great deal of trouble getting together on many of the conclusions. So we had started to implement some of the things that we thought were important, like a scorecard that had both the good and the bad in terms of signs of behavior. But otherwise, some of the more profound things in terms of governance became very difficult to maneuver with that large a group of people.
So John, you talk in your book, True Gentlemen, about the repercussions to university officials and others who try to rein in the behavior of fraternities. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think there was one university president in North Carolina who was exited from the university for trying to do something. Can
That's
you
right.
explain what happened?
So at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, the chancellor decided that he was going to back his dean, who had taken action against Sigma Alpha Epsilon. There was incredible evidence there. Three young men had been hospitalized for alcohol poisoning. And in the last case, they had a dash cam video from the police where the pledges were so drunk that one of them mistook the cruiser for a taxi and tried to get in. So it wasn't like there was a lot of an evidentiary problem. And so after the 4-year suspension, the undergraduates reached out to their very powerful alumni, including one of the top fundraisers for the governor, a state legislator who was on the education committee, and recruited 2 new trustees to the university, both of whom were members of SAE. And one of them told me that the only reason that he went on the board was to get the fraternity back, and that if it didn't happen, he was going to get rid of the chancellor. And he actually said he told the chancellor as much, and the chancellor told me that, which was really pretty an extraordinary sense of their power. And to make a long story short, after about a year or 2, the chancellor left for another job, and SAE, the chapter, is back. So they won that. It's really a kind of a cautionary tale for all of you here if you want to try to take disciplinary action.
So, Dr. Barron, have you had any threats on your job? Do you feel?
I don't really feel threatened in my job. I mean, there's a couple of things that I think, one is we had a horrible tragedy, and I just can't see anyone standing up against a new set of rules and regulations that are designed to make sure this doesn't happen again. And so that is one, I think, profound element that allowed Penn State to really create a whole set of new rules and regulations to take over the monitoring ourselves, to take over the adjudication ourselves, to change the number of parties that were occurring, to create this scorecard, to defer rush, to do all of these things. So this is one important element.
Let me back up a little bit. Explain the details of what you've done. You've deferred rush, meaning rush is no longer held in the fall semester, it's held in the spring semester.
So here's the basic idea. If you come in and all you know is your sorority or your fraternity, because that's the first thing you've done, and you go through a process and it involves hazing, do you feel like you have to accept it? Because otherwise you've gone out into the university world and you've lost your friends and you've missed the opportunity to make other friends. So our concept is you come in, get your footing academically. That means you have to pass a certain number of courses with an appropriate grade point. See what else the university has to offer, so that if you decide it's the chess club or that it's sailing or something like that you want to do, you develop another set of friends, have your academic footing, and then in the spring, in a shorter period of time, have the rush and pledging occur, so that then I think we are at least increasing the chances that if you see your grade point at risk or you see that you might be hazed, that you would walk away. Because part of this phenomenon is really bad things happening, sometimes disgusting things happening, and people tolerating it because of this profound need to be a part of a group.
And
so
you've
can we
also
take that away? Yeah.
You've also banned hard liquor.
We have.
And you've also removed the recognition for some fraternities. How many?
So far, we have taken away recognition from a total of 13 fraternities and sororities that did not follow the rules, and we don't provide exceptions. This is part of it. Now, I will say in that group that in some cases, as our alumni have learned why we're doing the things we're doing and how important it is to do it, and that we're serious, the alums have actually gone into houses and said, we're shutting you down. You're not going to lose our house. This wasn't the behavior we had when we were here. And so you're out. And so you do see also that we are starting to gain some partners in that. Nonetheless, you still do get pushback because it was a self-governing model, and now it isn't.
So you also had some fraternities, some national fraternities that aren't playing ball with this, and they're saying our chapters can remain in the State College area. How do you deal with that?
In my view, this is a dangerous moment in this process because we watched a terrible circumstance at the University of Colorado, and the University of Colorado created a set of rules, and the Greek organizations all went private. They said, we don't have to pay attention to your rules. We're on private property. We're privately managed. We don't have to pay attention. And I will leave it to them to comment on how well that is going for them. But we see cases where houses may sit there and say, well, our national organization is still keeping our charter. We don't have to pay attention to your rules. I'm willing to bet anything that's where the very worst behavior is going to occur because now you have no oversight whatsoever. And so we've done a couple of things. One is we've started to really pressure the nationals that it is totally inappropriate that if we remove recognition because of bad behavior and we detail it, that they remain chartered, that it's going to do nothing but get the national in trouble. We've had 3 that basically that did not occur. We've convinced 2 that it's in their best interest to do so. But this is also one of the reasons why when 31 universities came together last month to discuss this, that we decided a national scorecard database would be of value. Because now, if I'm looking at a scorecard of good behavior and bad behavior for Greek life, and I see that this is a bad actor as a fraternity all across the nation, then I know I've got a problem with the national. And I know we can start to put pressure on that national. I also know how to act differently in a case like that because I realize that the partnership that we have with the national is not there. So parents can use it for a different reason.
I want to talk about your recent meeting in a minute.
Yeah.
John, right now I'd like to ask you, why are these organizations so powerful? And you know, frankly, some people are saying they should just be shut down. Why do you think that hasn't happened?
Well, I mean, they are very powerful. They're among the most loyal donors to universities. At University of Indiana, which I studied for the book, they made up, I think, 20% of students, but 60% of donors. In terms of national influence, there's even a political action committee, which is known as Frat Pack, that has given more than $1 million to members of Congress to fight against national anti-hazing legislation. And they've often been quite successful. And the other reason really is that they're more popular than they've ever been. There are 400,000 members. They're up 50% over the last decade. Students want to join, and colleges often market. So, you know, the ban, I mean, I think about it this way. If we were going to create a higher education system from scratch, would we have organizations that, you know, year after year kill a student? Probably not, right? But they're very ensconced in higher education. And if you try to do some kind of ban, which is often what people are asking, you run the risk of underground behavior, as what happened in Colorado. That wasn't even a ban, that was just regulation. So really, realistically, the answer is regulation and reform. That's really the only possibility.
We're going to be taking questions in about 5 minutes, so if anybody has a question that they want to mail in, there's the email address up there. Eric, could you tell us about the national meeting that you sponsored, co-sponsored of large universities, and what the result of that meeting was?
So this came from the viewpoint that that there is a great deal of pressure on presidents that come from different directions. There are a number of students that push back, and nationals, and that we need that partnership as one element. And 2, that university presidents can be more powerful if we work together in this space. So we had essentially shared with John Thrasher at Florida State and King Alexander at LSU and Penn State, all of whom experienced a death on their campus in the last year, to share their experiences on what they did, why they did it, and what type of pushback that they got. But the point was really, what can we do together? So if we have that national database, a scorecard, and we can all, as presidents, adopt the same one and submit that data, a parent can look and say, okay, this is a better option for my child, or I don't want my child to go to this one. Look at the problems that are occurring there. We can also get a sense of whether they're bad actors nationally and put pressure together. I can imagine that if I had a national organization that was really a bad actor, and they knew that presidents across this nation were going to look at them and say, you know what, you don't belong on our campuses if you can't help us do the right thing. So that's one element that I think would make it powerful.
So explain how this scorecard would work.
So,
who would pay for it?
So basically, I think it's in the best interest of every university to develop such a scorecard so that people see what the grade point is, people see how many noise complaints there are, how many violations that have occurred there, what the size of the group is, just all sorts of different parameters. And also some good things, like, for example, how many service hours they do. There are many things you can put on a scorecard like that give you a signal. And the signal also may let you see when a house is going bad. Because right now you have a snapshot. But if I start to see grade points dropping, or I start to see police reports going up, that may be a red flag to be able to take action. So this can be a powerful tool. Then if I add it for everybody, and we all agree what that scorecard should look like, then we also have a national picture on particular organization, more potential to put pressure on groups. But it isn't just that. It's also, let's take anti-hazing laws. John made the point that nationally that may be a very hard thing to do. Pennsylvania, in collaboration with Jim and Evelyn Piazza and Penn State, we have gotten an anti-hazing bill through the Senate, and I believe it's about to pass through the House. It gives presidents another tool, because before it was a slap on the wrist. It's a misdemeanor, regardless of how severe the hazing was. Well, now we can have a range of penalties. Again, that empowers police and the university. Why shouldn't we be sharing these nationally? So to have a national place to put best practices, to put laws so that a president can go to their legislature and say, look, these 3 states have passed this and it's having a profound impact. That's the objective, and that's the type of thing that came out of this meeting of 31 universities.
John, do you think this kind of thing can work based on your knowledge of the fraternity industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a concrete example in that in the book, I focused on Sigma Alpha Epsilon because there was a lawsuit years ago that required it to disclose all of its disciplinary infractions over the last 5 years. And I could use that as a guide to see what their behavior was like and to track down the fact that they had had more deaths than any other fraternity in America. They had had 10 over a decade. And this put enormous amount of pressure, when I reported this when I was working at Bloomberg, on the fraternity. It threatened them with the loss of insurance, and they took a pretty dramatic action. They eliminated pledging, the sort of institutionalized hazing that most fraternities do, and that was in 2014. And since then, they haven't had another death, and their rates of claims have gone down something like 90%. They've also shut down something like 40 chapters. So you can see,
including the SAE chapter at my alma mater, which was shut down last December. So we're going to move to questions. Does anybody have any questions from the audience? I don't see anybody.
There's one there.
one over there.
But I do see one on the screen. How do you deal with the media spotlight that results from these incidents? Dr. Barron.
Well, you know, I can only say one thing, and I think you should be direct. This is much more about the families and much more about what we do in order to prevent this from happening again. And that has to be your focus, regardless of what is swirling around you and the stories swirling around you. You have to do the things that make it not happen again, if you can. And I will tell you, if behind closed doors you have people that do stupid things, and I have tens of thousands of 19 and 20-year-olds, occasionally they do something that is stupid. This is in a case of something profoundly reckless. So these things may happen, but you just need to focus on fixing the problems that you find.
Okay, a question?
Yeah, my name is Marie Schwartz. I'm the CEO of a company called Teen Life Media, which is a platform for preparing students for college. So my perspective is not as a university president. I have two sons who went to college, both of whom were in fraternities. It seems like there's an opportunity here to get the students involved, much like there is for the discussion about free speech, in policing themselves. I know that my son, one of my sons was at Lehigh, and he was a representative for Greek life from his fraternity. Is there some way to both get parents, well, students, but also parents involved in addressing this issue? And so that's one question. And the other is, what are the sororities doing? It sounded like there was a lot of bad behavior going on there too. And so I guess, is the solution to the problem, blowing open the doors a little bit more and exposing this more to the community itself and getting this community involved in the solutions?
Well, the rules that we're applying apply to everyone, basically. And we have a lot of educational programs to see if we can get the students involved. I just think it's much deeper than that, especially when they have alumni that come back and assist them in that's not the way I did it. Or in our case, we have times where the mom and dad have gone in and bought the hard liquor when there was a liquor ban so that their sons or daughters wouldn't be seen doing it, or passing their wristband in a hotel to their underage daughter. So this requires everybody and getting everybody involved in this. But I personally think it takes all 15 things that we're doing. One of the other things we're doing is you cannot be a member without signing a personal pledge that you understand the rules and you understand what can happen. This at least sends a signal that there's no middle ground here, that I didn't read that, I didn't understand it. Their signatures on the page. I accept that responsibility for that behavior. But I think it takes all of these things, and I'm constantly asking parents for help and nationals for help and community members for help. You need them all.
I can address your question about sororities, which is really interesting. Sororities have problems, but not this particular problem. You see virtually no deaths at sororities, and there are two reasons. Sororities have an adult live-in advisor, almost universally, and they ban alcohol in the chapter houses. They don't have parties in their houses. Now, the downside is that they're exposed when they go to the fraternity houses, but I'm pretty sure, and there's some evidence to this effect, that if you could somehow enforce the drinking laws in the fraternity houses and get rid of the sort of underage bartenders that serve underage people in fraternity houses, that they would be safer too. So I think that the sorority model is really a good one. There was a fraternity Phi Delta Theta that in 2000 eliminated alcohol at their chapter houses, and they saw a dramatic decrease. They had many deaths. They had none until this past year, unfortunately, which shows that they have to be vigilant. But I think that's a really important model.
Well, I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but I appreciate both of your being here, and thank you all.